Whether you are traveling to the US, UK, Canada, or any other European country, chances are that you'd be interviewed by a border patrol officer who will decide whether you get to enter the country or not. This video is about that interview because the questions may seem straightforward, but they could have hidden traps in them. Moreover, if things go south, what is very well possible is that the officer might take you in for secondary inspection. And in a private room, they will go ahead and start inspecting your chats, your search history, your mobile phone, your laptop, everything. And if they find something they don't like, they're going to question you about that as well. Now, 90% of the times you're safe, but it's always good to prepare for a rainy day. So this video will help you there. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the commonly asked questions which come up in almost every interview. I'm going to be giving you sample answers and I'm going to be giving you tips along with that. Let's get started with the questions. The number one question that you will almost always face is, what is the purpose of your visit? At this point, you want to say, I'm here for tourism, business, family visit, study, whatever. But this answer should usually be in line with the visa you are entering the country with. You want to be clear and honest, but you still want to know that you're doing the right thing. So for instance, if you say that you're here to study, but you're going on a tourism visa, that's a problem. And that would result in you being deported. Question number two, how long do you plan to stay in this country? It's again a very popular question. And again, your answer should be concise, to the point. You want to say something like this. Officer, I plan on staying here for 4 weeks, 10 days, whatever, essentially. Give the exact period. If you don't really know the exact period, try to give the ballpark estimate. You must ensure that your answer matches with the duration of stay on your visa. So for instance, if a tourist visa is valid for only 30 days in the country you're visiting, you cannot state that you're going to be staying there for 35 days. Remember that certain countries might have this as law that you may need to present a ticket, which is basically a return ticket, as to when you're leaving the country. And if that is their law, you must comply with it. You should already have the ticket in that case. Of course, if you're in a country for a long duration of time, could be more than a month. In many cases, you can just get away with saying that I have not booked the ticket yet. But again, make sure that you're complying with the laws of the country you're entering. Third question, again, very popular, is where will you be staying during your visit? At this stage, you want to mention something like this. Officer, I'm going to be staying at Carlton, and then the address of the hotel could be at, Bridge Street, something like that. Or again, if you're staying with a family member or a friend, in that case, you want to mention, officer, I'm going to be staying with this person. But make sure that whatever you mention should, in all honesty, align with whatever you are generally basically entering the country for. So for instance, if you say that I am staying at a lodging given by XYZ company, then there might be questions about why XYZ company is giving you lodging. Are they your employer? Are they someone who is sponsoring your trip, right? So those questions might come up, of course. Fourth question, very popular, is do you have a return ticket? At this stage, you want to say, yes, officer, I have a return ticket for XYZ date, and you should be ready to pull up your booking. In most cases, what I recommend is to save the PDF or take a screenshot of your ticket so that you can show it. Because when you enter a new country, in many cases, what can happen is that you may not have data. Or in many cases, you might want to keep it printed with you because let's say your phone runs out of juice. Well, that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? Then you can actually show the printout of the ticket. Fifth, very common question is, have you visited this country before? And again, you want to be very honest about whether you visited the country before. So you can say something like, yes, officer, I was here back in 2014 for business. Or you can say, no, officer, this is my first time. Sixth question, do you have sufficient funds to support your stay during this trip? Or they might ask you, how much cash are you carrying with you? What kind of funds are you carrying? All these questions are really the same. What they really want to know at this stage is, can you afford to be in the country for XYZ number of days? Remember that certain countries might even have rules saying that per day, per week, you may need this amount of money to be proven. So if you're staying for 1 week, then you may need to prove, let's say, $100 per day, let's say, you need to prove essentially that you have $700. It depends on a country to country basis. Of course, some countries have these laws, some don't. But still, your funds should be reasonable enough to last you for the duration of the trip. All right. So you want to mention at this stage that, yes, officer, I'm carrying with me $5,000 and I'm going to be staying here for 1 week. So I believe that should be enough. Something like that. All right. Or you can say something else as well. You can have more funds. You can have less funds. Keep in mind that, of course, there's a certain amount of cash that you can carry in a country. There's always an upper limit. So make sure that you're staying within that limit. And at the same point in time, the rest you can always say that, yes, I also have my credit card in case the cash is less. Remember, in certain cases, the officer might even go as far as to ask you for a bank statement, for your card statement, for your bank balance. All these things might be asked if they believe that you may not be able to sustain in the country given the amount of cash you carried. The seventh question is, what do you do for a living? Again, a very common question that you might see come up. Even though this may not hold significance when you're entering the country, it has a lot of potential ramifications. For instance, if you are unemployed, right, there may be separate questions asked from you as to, what are your plans in the country, how long you're staying, you might need a return ticket in that case, right? Because if you're unemployed, you don't really have a lot of commitments, right? So all those things come into the picture as well. For instance, if you're unemployed and they find your birth certificate in your bag and you're just carrying it around, it shows that you might actually immigrate to the country you're traveling to. And hence, it's really a combination of things that really help the immigration team decide whether to let you enter or not. So an answer should be that, yes, officer, I am working at XYZ company back in, India, back wherever you come from, right? Could be anywhere really in the world. You could be self-employed, you could be a student, and you could even be unemployed. But the important part is to answer truthfully, because if they ask for proof and you don't have it, that's going to create certainly issues for you and might result in deportation. The eighth question may be, do you have family or friends in this country? And again, you want to be honest, especially if you've mentioned someone's reference in the visa application. So let's say you applied for the visa and someone sponsored your visa. Or let's say you applied for the visa and in this application you mentioned a friend's name. Later on, when you go to the officer, you should not say, no officer, I do not, because they already might have this information. Hence, it's always better to be truthful. And you can say, yes, I have friends in this country, but I don't think I'll be visiting them because they stay far away, right? Something like that. Or you can say, yes, officer, I have my brother in this country and I'll be visiting him anyway during my trip. It depends on essentially what you're doing, where you're staying, all these things, of course. But your plan should be cohesive. It should be consistent. Keep in mind that the officer may ask for the contact details or the address of this person that you're visiting, and you might want to have it handy. Question number 9, are you bringing any food, plants, or other restricted items into the country? They might ask you this question in many ways, but the point is you want to be aware of the laws of the country you're entering, what is allowed, what isn't allowed. Most common things, of course, you might already know TSA already checks for this initially itself, that you should not have any batteries in the check-in luggage, all those things, of course. But at the same point in time, certain things are just not allowed into a particular country, and this inspection is separate from that. So no matter which bag you put it in, they might not want you to carry that into the country. So if you feel that a certain item that you're bringing into the country might not be permitted and you don't know the laws, be honest about it. Tell the officer, I do have a doubt over here. I'm bringing XYZ right now in my bag in the country. I'm not quite sure if it's allowed, but apart from that, my bag's all clear. I have no questions. So with that, of course, you can strike up a conversation and you can be honest about it, and they can at least help you remove it if at all it is not permitted. But what's wrong is that later on, the officer finds out, whereas you initially basically mentioned that, no, I'm not bringing anything illegal, essentially. Then the officer finds out, and then, they tell you that, hey, this was not allowed. Why did you declare it when we asked you to? At that stage, of course, that can create some issues for you. Question number 10, they may ask you the address of your final destination. At that stage, you can mention if the final destination is exactly where you basically, took the flight and got to. So let's say if you went to California and you're staying within California, you can give that address. Otherwise, you can mention that, I'm going to be staying at the Ritz-Carlton here for 5 days. And then after that, I'm going somewhere else. And it's completely okay if you don't really have your entire trip mapped out, but it's better to tell them that, okay, 5 days in California, 6 days in Boston, and after that, 3 days in New York, rather than just saying I have not planned anything. And of course, if they ask you some addresses, it's better to, like I said, keep screenshots of the hotels, of the locations that you're visiting. Now, before we end this video, there are certain questions I want to talk to you about. These are sort of weird questions that might be asked to you when you visit some airports. For instance, they may ask you, why are you traveling alone? Is your family or is your spouse aware of this trip that you're having? Are you planning to meet anyone here that you met online? Are you single or married? Or if you're in a relationship, they might ask you, how long have you been in this relationship? And it might be important to understand whether the person you're in a relationship with is in this country that you're visiting or outside. All these things might come up. And unfortunately, women face most of these questions, whereas men face less. Over here, I want to end this video with some additional tips. The number one tip is to remain calm and polite throughout the interview. No matter what kind of a question is asked or how personal that is, don't let it get to you, and don't start screaming at the officer or being disrespectful. At the same time, don't be too nervous, because that may actually impact the quality of or the result of your interview. You start to look a little bit suspicious when you're nervous. Number two, consistency is absolutely the key. Whatever you mention should basically exist, right? They might ask you proof for some of these things. The information should be in line with whatever you mentioned when you applied for the visa. And of course, when you're entering, right, you should have some documents to support that. Third tip is to keep your documents handy. They might ask for certain documents you already know: your passport, your visa, your accommodation, your travel routes, and your bookings. All these things you want to keep with you. If you're going to study somewhere, you might want to have this acceptance letter from the university, right? All these documents, which are absolutely important, should be with you. Number four is to always be honest, because what happens is if you're not truthful and they find out a loose end and they start pulling at it, they will realize that you were lying and they will catch you. And in that case, of course, what will happen is that 9 out of 10 times you're looking at a deportation, which means a huge financial loss, first off, for the flight. And also on top of that, you might face a ban in certain cases as well. Number five is know your rights. For each and every country, there are different rules and different extents to which these officers might go. Some countries allow the officers to go ahead, take your laptop, your phone, check your mobile history, check chats, all these details. But keep in mind, you still do have rights, and hence you want to understand those rights before you enter the country. And this, of course, depends on a country-to-country basis. Now, these were just some of the top immigration questions that they ask at the airport. Now, we make a lot of videos about traveling, settling, working overseas. And if that's something that you may be interested in, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and also follow me on Instagram for more such content. And until the next time, of course, thank you so much for watching, and I wish you all the best for your interview. Goodbye and take care.